I'm Sam Hazardine, and today I'm here with Dr. Tom Petrie, who is a relatively newly qualified doctor, to talk about being a medical student, some of the challenges as a medical student, and how to thrive as a medical student. Tom has documented his journey in the public arena on Instagram, and he's got 22,000 people who find him, I guess, entertaining and interesting enough to follow. So I'm very confident that we're going to have a great discussion today that's really relevant, I think, to medical students. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure being on here. And yeah, I think it's something I'm really passionate talking about, mental well-being, and I've been a doctor for a year now, so I'm still fresh out of med school. And having been through all of that, I understand the challenges, and I'm really keen to try and help some people get through it. Now I've got a little bit more perspective now I'm outside of med school. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, brilliant. As you say, you're far enough down the track to have a little bit of perspective, but close enough that you still remember how it was. When we were talking and preparing for this, you shared something with me that I found, pretty confronting. That 1 in 10 medical students have suicidal thoughts. Now, putting that in perspective, if you think about that as you're sitting there in your class and you're in your lecture theatres, like if you think about those rows of 20 students or so, a couple of them are thinking about killing themselves. And I mean, that to me is, it's awful, obviously, but it's also indicative of just how difficult life is as a medical student. And I think this is not just about the 1 in 10 who have suicidal thoughts. It's about the other 9 in 10 who may be struggling as well. Like, that suicidal ideation is at the very extreme end of the spectrum, but medical students are struggling, aren't they?
Exactly. And yes, that was a big study done by the British Medical Journal, and I remember reading it, and although it was terrible and really, really sad that there's such high numbers, I can't say I'm surprised. There's so many reasons why medical students can struggle, whether it's the pressures of exams, comparing yourself to peers, just the amount of work you have to do. I think sometimes we forget that, especially in your clinical years, you're essentially doing a 9-to-5 job and learning an entire medical syllabus on the side. So it really, really is insane. And then, of course, the big one is just some of the things you see on a daily basis are not normal to see at that stage in your life. I remember in my very first week of med school, we were put on something called very early clinical experience, and I really wasn't ready for it. I was more focused on kind of making friends, going out, having fun at that time. And I remember seeing an old lady who unfortunately passed away with her family all around her, and just leaving that. I was only 18, fresh out of school, and coming home that day really shaken up, really questioning whether this was going to be the career for me. So yeah, so many different reasons, and I'd love to be able to share some ways in which kind of we can cope with these things and make sure we look after ourselves as medical students.
That is what I'm looking forward to discussing. This is not, a practical sort of, build your clinical relationships, manage your time. I mean, we're talking about some core principles here that I think are going to be really, really useful, because I think, any other approach underestimates just the quality of the people we're talking to. Medical students are incredibly capable. They're incredibly intelligent. They're high achieving. Like, we're talking to the very, very best of the people, because they also have a social conscience. Like, these are good, capable people, yet they're struggling. So what we're going to talk about is 3 core areas today. We're going to talk about, yes, it's tough, acknowledging that, but actually talking about some really simple ways to handle that and to give some perspective to that. We're going to get into some useful practices to deal with the pressure. It's not that there isn't pressure, it's that we can deal with it. And then the final area we're going to cover off, which I think is going to be really useful, is a very constructive way to get some perspective. As you say, you're a year down the track, to actually approach your career as a medical student, because there are certainly some traps that we fall into, and there are some simple fixes that can really set people up for a good, productive, long career.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Excellent.
So we're going to start off with the fact that it's tough. You know, being a medical student, being a junior doctor, it's a tough job. As you said, we see stuff that most people never see. I can still remember when I was first asked to go and do a death certificate down in the morgue. You know, it's just one of the things. You just go and do the death certificate. It's actually quite confronting to a young person who maybe has never seen a dead body, outside of funerals and things, to actually go down and do the death. It's difficult. So let's talk about that, but let's also talk about how do we deal with it, because you've developed some really useful, constructive ways to deal with it.
The key thing for me is you need some way of processing what you see. Now, it's different for different people. I use a couple of things. I rely and lean quite heavily on my parents. I think because my dad's got a medical background, so I'm able to kind of discuss that with him. And I think you just need someone, whether it's a friend or a family member, who you can talk to about what you're experiencing, what you've seen that day, and just being able to talk about it. So that's personally what I lean on. I think what I've heard as well is a lot of people like the aspect of journaling. And that's actually why I started my Instagram account. It was to kind of reflect on these stories. And I felt like it really helped me process what I was seeing, and just come to terms with it and learn from it and move forward. And yeah, so I think that would be my advice to people. Obviously, talking about these things are great, but also I know journaling is a very in thing at the moment. And I'd suggest just writing down these events you're seeing and how it makes you feel. And yeah, I think that could really help people process some of these pretty horrible, tough things that we see.
Yeah, get it out. Don't carry it. Do you think that there's value in, because, talking to people about it is one thing, but is there value in having a person, or as you say, it's your parents, so it's not just, I'll talk with this person, I'll just talk, do you think there's value in building a relationship with someone who kind of is part of the journey, is part of, has had previous conversations with you about it, for example?
Absolutely. I think it's often hard, isn't it, to open up to lots of different people. There's probably only a few people in my life that I can really open up to about how I'm feeling deep down. So yeah, if you can find that one person or have that relationship that they know that you're going to speak to about that would be really, really helpful. And yeah, I'm very grateful that I've got my parents for that.
And be it parents, be it a partner, I do think there's some value in it not always being your partner, because you want to. I mean, if it works, it works. But sometimes it can also bring everything back. Maybe you want your partner to be a reprieve from that. I've had some conversations with multiple other people in this series, and they keep bringing up the value of a professional. You can employ someone to be this person, a psychologist, for example, or it could be a mentor at the hospital. It could be a fellow medical student, but someone you sort of set that time with, and you really just get this stuff out is the key, isn't it?
Luckily, because of my dad, I haven't had experience with kind of a professional, but I know lots of people in my position have. Lots of doctors do that, so I'd always encourage that, being able to speak to a professional about these things. Yeah. It's
interesting, me looking back with some perspective, I didn't deal with this stuff. I just drank heavily, and that led to a head injury. And, instead of kind of processing it, I guess I just sort of numbed it down. And that wasn't a constructive way to deal with it. There are considerably better ways, as this is the value of talking to people like yourself to bring that perspective. So that's that first bit, is actually making sure you have a way to get it out and a practice of doing that. Journaling, finding a person, having someone you build that relationship with. What are some of the other ways that you've used?
I'm sure people have heard it before, but I think it's so important to not let medicine define your entire life. So it's so important to maintain your hobbies and things like that. So many people will, the moment they get to med school, stop doing what they love. And I think it's so important to keep what makes you you as a person and make sure you keep these things up. So for me, it was basketball. Absolutely live and breathe basketball. And I did everything I could to keep that going through med school. And I honestly, reflecting back on it now, I don't know how I could have got through those 5 years without having this other kind of ambition and passion around me. So whatever makes you you, whatever your hobbies are, whatever your passions are, I think that has to be your absolute number one priority throughout medical school and being a doctor, to make sure you keep that going.
I think, interestingly, again, reflecting back on it, having those other things and those other passions is somewhat of an anchor, isn't it? Because your medical career, the problem, we do to some extent define ourselves as doctors. it is what it is. We're all pretty happy with it. And if you're a medical student listening to this, I know you're going to be thrilled the first time you book yourself on a plane and check in as doctor. I remember when the first international flight I had as a doctor, sidled on up there, Dr. Sam Hazeldine. I was pretty pleased with myself. They're like, yeah, good, check me in. And I was like, so just letting you know if there's an issue on the plane, I'm your guy. You can call on me. And they're like, oh, that's really great. Thank you. And I was like, so any chance of an upgrade? And that didn't happen. But we do, it's a big part of who we are. There's no question. But our careers are going to, as with anything, they're going to go up and down. You're going to have great periods in your career when you're on fire. You're going to have periods where it just feels like a drag, where it's difficult, where for the second time you haven't gotten a training program or whatever. There's going to be tough times, and having those interests outside can be an anchor in those tough times, that life is not all defined by my career. It is to some extent, but it's not completely. And I think that's such a useful thing, having those interests beyond medicine. Now, there was something else that you use that we discussed. And what I find really interesting about this is that mindfulness and meditation has come up from most of the doctors in this Well Doctor series. And I did some research on this, that only 6% of people actually meditate regularly. But in this series, so far, it's been 80% of the doctors who are doing well meditate. It's a small number. I'm not going to say it's statistically significant, but there's something there. So talk to me about meditation and mindfulness for you.
Absolutely. I'm so passionate about it. It was something I got into probably 7 years ago. And I think a lot of people when they first think of mindfulness, they think of a Buddhist monk in the mountains humming away, and it all being quite extreme. And I think it can be so simple as just taking a couple of minutes out of your day just to kind of ground yourself, bring yourself back to your breath, and just calm yourself down. And I think a lot of people get put off it because they think of having to be in silence for 20 minutes or even longer. And it seems like such a challenge and really hard to do it for that long. But a key thing for me is that it can literally just be 2 minutes a day. And it's one of those things that you have to train yourself to do. The brain's like a muscle, and you wouldn't go to the gym and suddenly start lifting heavier than everyone else in there. It would take years and years and years of work. And I think that's key to know, that it's not something you can just wake up tomorrow and just be great at. It's something that will take time, and you've got to work slowly on it every day, and you really will get the benefits from it. I know that when I've had kind of tricky times throughout med school and stuff, I've really leaned heavily into it, and I just could not recommend it highly enough to anyone at medical school.
I mean, for me, I've been doing it now daily for about 4 years, and it just helps to create that little bit of space between stimulus and response. We become less reactive, and in a healthcare environment, it's so important to be, to have that mindfulness and not just be reacting. I love your approach of just start small. I recently, I love meditating, and I didn't always, though. I remember when I started, and it took me a long time to get a meditation practice, because I started with, this is the classic doctor approach, is let's go all in. I did transcendental meditation, 20 minutes twice a day. And I hated it at the start of 30 days, and I hated it at the end. Where eventually it was like, actually just start with 2 minutes using Headspace. And I built up to 10 minutes a day. I recently worked with a friend of mine, a doctor who, very accomplished guy, and he's like, you love meditation, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, here's the app I use. It's 10 minutes a day, go for it. He's like, I'll do 30 days. Can you text me every day when you've done it? This is me, he asking me, so that I'm kind of held accountable. And so I text him every day, I did it. Got to the end of the 30 days, and he's like, I'm terrible at it. It's not for me. And I'm like, the thing is, maybe you were too ambitious. And maybe 10 minutes a day is just too ambitious. Start with 2 minutes. Start with a minute even. Just build the practice.
That's really interesting, because actually my first experience was, I think it was great at school. They introduced it to us, but it was all of us in one room, the entire school in one room, and them getting us to try and meditate for 10 minutes. And obviously that didn't work at all. Everyone was deliberately coughing. And so I had a really negative experience of it at the start, but Yeah, I agree. Just breaking it down a minute a day and work yourself up, and I think you'd be surprised how beneficial you'll find it.
Yeah, I think meditation is it's a journey we have to take ourselves. You know, you get the classic joke of the mindfulness seminar at lunchtime in the hospital when you're holding your pager. Like, you've just got to find what works for you. I think that's the thing, is it's so varied, but within that variation, there is ways anyone can find a practice, and there is such value.
And just one more thing on that, because one of the barriers that I found was for different people that tried it is try and make it part of a routine. So I have to do it first thing in the morning. I can't do it another time of the day. It just won't work for me. So I think working out what your routine will be and trying to make it part of your day instead of just fitting it in where as and when.
I totally agree. And even an extra point on that is, within that routine, you can have flexibility. Because I'm the same. I want to be first thing in the morning. But if I get up and my kids, I'm getting them to school, and I'll do it after I've got them to school. It's going to happen in the morning, but there's when you've got external factors, sometimes you need to build that in. So look, I think that is the thing. Being a medical student is very difficult, but when we get it out, when we keep up those interests, and we have that discipline to keep it up, when we use tools like mindfulness and meditation, we are in a better position to deal with how tough it is. And that's the thing. We've actually got to. I look at this and go, I started with, medical students are the most capable people in the world. And I mean, when I got into medical school, you needed pretty much straight A pluses. Now it's off the charts. The level to get into medical school is mind blowing, and most of us 20 years down the track wouldn't get into medical school these days. So these are the best of the best. And I look at this stuff, and this is just the final little bit. This is the bit that can make all the difference. So it's worth doing.
Definitely. And I saw well and good saying it. I wish I had this much clarity when I was at med school. So don't for a minute think like that you're meant to have this all in place at the moment. It's something people can build on. And I definitely didn't have all this clarity, and I wasn't doing all of this at med school. So yeah, I hope it helps someone.
Hey, great. Even if it just brings it forward a little bit, and even if when you are in a position where you go, actually, looking back on this conversation, it's like, now this is something I maybe have, I'm aware that I've let my other interests slip. I'm aware. It's not about being perfect. It's like meditation. It's noticing when you're still stuck in your thoughts and coming back. And so, that's as a medical student, and we're going to talk about pressure next, but that is part of, taking the pressure off. Is I don't have to be perfect. I've acknowledged that I'm off track. Give yourself a pat on the back and gently bring yourself back on track.
Awesome. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So pressure is the second area we wanted to talk about, because there is a lot of pressure in medical school, but there is a lot of self-created pressure in medical school. And I come back to, if you got into medical school, these days, you are beyond capable of getting through medical school. Like well beyond the academic bar. So we put this pressure on ourselves, but let's talk about how there is some real pressure, but how some of it is pretty much self-created.
Well, one of the things that we spoke about when we had our little pre-meeting, which really, really stuck with me, is just knowing that med school want you to pass, and they're putting a lot of money and a lot of time into you. So I think just having that in the back of your mind, that once you're into med school, you pretty much will be a doctor. You're
in the gang at that point. I think that's a useful thing for medical students to know. As doctors, as academics and things in this profession, once you're a med student, we see you as you're in the gang.
Yeah.
It's hard to get in the gang. It's very hard to get in the gang, but once you're in, we don't want you out.
Definitely. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in England, it was pretty much, if you got through the first year, and most people did, again, they want you to get through, you will get through the first year, but especially once you're through that first year, you just will be a doctor. They will find a way to make sure you get those results and get through it. So that's a really nice thing to keep reminding yourself of.
I agree. Once you're in, you're going to be in. And sometimes students will go through, you're all more than capable, A, but B, we go through difficult periods, and we may lose we may lose focus, whatever. we may fail some exams, but they're going to give you more chances. They are going to work with you because, as you say, they want you to be a doctor. They want to get you there because you've already proven that you've passed, you're at a high enough bar.
And I think a lot of med students can be, their first kind of failure, if you want to call it that, can be at med school. I know it was just at the start of my second year, and to be honest, I was probably having a little bit too much fun. I was on the basketball team, going out quite a bit, really enjoying myself. And I remember one Thursday morning after sports night, waking up, a bit of a sore head, and finding that I'd failed an interim exam. So it wasn't a big deal, but for me, that was such a huge deal. And I know it was for my friends as well. We hadn't failed much at that point to kind of get into med school. It really, really took a big confidence hit. And I wish I had someone at that moment in time to tell me, you'll be fine. It's just one exam. They'll make sure you get there.
Get some perspective on it. And I think, again, I run the largest doctor staffing agency in Australasia. And so I can speak pretty well to hiring. Your first job, sure, they're going to look at your marks. Beyond that, no one's really caring how you did at medical school. They're certainly not caring how you did in your second year or your third year or whatever. They're going to look at how you are as a doctor. And how you are as a doctor is in part academic, but more, when you graduate medical school and start as a doctor, you realize that it's mainly beyond the academics, that to make yourself a good doctor.
Yeah, a point I hadn't thought about actually. And the best doctors I know are definitely not the smartest, most book smart people in the world. So I think that's a really nice point, just reminding yourself that, for example, at my med school, you were put into deciles, so top 10%, bottom 20%, that kind of thing. And I think it's really nice to remind yourself that no matter what percentile you're in, that doesn't define what percentile you'll be in as a doctor. It really doesn't. There's so much more to being a doctor than just your exams.
Absolutely. And we talked about this in the preparation as well. Even if you're in the bottom 10%, it's important to remember you're in the bottom 10% of the top 1 of 1%. So for the first time in your life, when you get into medical school, you suddenly, for some of us, most of us, we're no longer the smartest person in the room. Like at school, most of us were, pretty top in our ducks, whatever. We were pretty good. And then you get into medical school and everyone's pretty good. And some are really good. You've got the savants who make us all feel like idiots.
Dreadful.
And absolutely, they're the worst. And so we start to feel stupid because we're comparing ourselves now to off the charts intelligence.
Yeah, so this is the other thing we spoke about, wasn't it? The pressure created by looking at your peers. One thing that I started doing really late on in med school, I'm mainly benefiting it from as a doctor, but I strongly believe everyone should do it at med school, is keep on your phone notes of positive things that either patients or kind of your seniors, consultants have given you a compliment or really kind of motivated you. And I think it's just a way of, when you look back on it, you can read all these amazing things people have said about you and all these positive things they can give, and you really can give yourself a boost knowing that, oh, I'm actually doing the right thing. I'm actually doing good things here. So yeah. That's something I'm really benefiting from now. Every time you have a little slump or a little confidence hit because you haven't done as well as you've liked, you can read back on all these nice things that patients have said to you, and it really just gives you such a strong boost. So I feel so strongly about that everyone should give that a go.
Absolutely. We've done in the series, we've talked about mind, and we've actually had a conversation with a psychologist, and part of this, I think, is building our own internal locus of control of our self-belief, like finding ways to build that self-belief that don't require us comparing ourselves to others. Because the moment you get to medical school, you're always going to find someone smarter than you, and even if you're the smartest, you're going to find someone who's better with patience than you, or someone who, the smartest ones are looking at going, but that person's got all these other interests. Like it's just a hiding to nothing. And so building that, that own self-belief, and I love that way you look at, find things that I can draw back from my own career to go, I should be here. I am good at what I do, or I'm good enough.
I know, just an example from a personal perspective. I always really felt like I struggled with clinical skills more than most people. I remember my friends always coming back from placement being like, oh, I've done loads of bloods today, I got it first time, all of these things. I felt like I was pretty useless at them. And I remember going to do bloods on my first patient. I was pouring with sweat, my hands were shaking, I was absolutely terrified, I could barely speak. And I was in the room with the patient, got the needle in, may or may not have hit a vein, probably having a little root around, and the patient suddenly said, I'm going to pass out. And they slipped down their chair onto me. I had a needle all over the place. I had to scream for the nurse to come in. They put oxygen on the patient, all hell breaking loose. The patient was obviously fine. They just fainted. And I remember going home that day thinking, oh my goodness, I'm absolutely terrible at this. So yeah, that's just an example of really how you can get low self-esteem in med school.
There are a lot of ways you can build low self-esteem at medical school, because there's so many areas to be useless at.
Yeah.
And again, academics is one of them. I still couldn't tell you about the Krebs cycle. But all these clinical, we can find things to focus on that we're not good at. We can find ways to, I shared this with you, and I was debated whether to share this one, but I think, what was that?
I didn't know. I wasn't going to mention it in case you didn't want to bring it up.
No, well, I'll mention it because I think the fact is, we're actually, if you go back to it, when you're at medical school, generally you've got the mature students, but a lot of us were quite young, immature, just pretty useless at life, just blundering our way through, as you are as a young person. It is what it is. And then we're thrown into this professional environment, which, is held to the very highest standards. And it's really quite difficult. And the expectations, certainly from patients, are generally that you're going to hit that line the first time. You're not going to be 4 times trying, so we can find all these ways. But I remember I was a training intern, so I was finally in medical school, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were doing an ONG. We were on an ONG run, and we were standing, the consultant had left us there. It wasn't training intern, we were like 4th year, and the consultant had left us there, and he's like, I want you to do the PV exam and report back to me. And a lot of trust in us, two guys, young guys doing it. So we're like, right, we're taking it very seriously. And the thing he'd said, when talking to him before, was, okay guys, what I want you to do in ONG, it's really, really important you talk the patient through what you're doing. Like, nothing should come as a surprise. We're like, got it. So my friend Andy was doing the exam, and obviously was trying his best, but wasn't thinking. And he's like, okay. Looks, he's in position. He's like, okay, I'm spreading the lips, and in we go. And I lost it at this point. Absolutely lost it. Then Andy realized what he'd said, started losing it too. The consultant heard us, came in, kicked us out. It was an absolute disaster. But, it was just an example of, you can be trying your best and be, you can be completely useless at the same time. And that's okay.
That's a brilliant story. Brilliant story. I can imagine you went home questioning a few things about your career at that point.
Oh, we both went home just thinking, there's no way we should be doctors. At least, thank goodness, it was a few years until we were. But, this is the thing. We can find reasons to feel useless, and there are so many daily ones as a medical student, because there are so many skills to master and learn, and you're just not going to be good at them all. And so making sure that you find that internal locus of control to, those rocks to go, here's why I should be here. Here's why I'm a good doctor. Here's the good feedback I've had. And then being mindful enough to be inspired by people who are good at things, but not beating yourself up and comparing yourself with them.
And maybe just one more thing to add to that. which I think is quite nice, especially for the medical students in maybe the 4th and 5th year, is the learning definitely doesn't stop. Even now, there's things I'm just not that confident with, like tricky cannulas.
I mean, I laugh at you. I laugh at you saying even now, like 1 year in. He's got no idea. You've got no idea. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things I'm still not confident with and learning. So don't for 1 minute think the moment you finish med school, you have to make sure you're perfect at everything. I remember in 5th year being terrified that I still didn't feel that confident at clinical skills. So the learning doesn't stop, and you don't have to be a perfect doctor by the end of it.
No, that's right. So that, to that point, what's more important than probably just even developing all these skills is developing a way to feel okay about yourself when there are more skills that you can't do than you can do. Because that's generally going to be the case until you're a consultant, super specialized, and then you are then the end of the road in terms of skill sets.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just going back to that, you need a way to remind yourself of how far you've come. And yeah, I actually had a moment the other day when I thought back to that story of not taking blood tests, and then in Australia, being how good Australia is, they've taught us all to do ultrasound guided bloods and cannulas. And I just had a little moment where I thought back to kind of med school when I couldn't even take it on the easiest veins in the world, and now we're doing ultrasound.
Now you're a pro.
Far from it, but I'm better than I was.
Yeah, exactly. Find those ways to feel good about yourself, because that's more important. Because if you're doing that, you're going to get better. You're going to be better, and you're going to grow. It's that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It's a journey. We're leaning into it. It's not about the results. It's actually about, mastery.
Definitely. Great way of looking at it.
So the next area we want to talk about, which is very relevant to medical students particularly, and junior doctors, is career. Because there are, everyone who gets into medical school has probably at some point got hyper-focused and decided, I'm going to be a doctor. And so we are good at setting a goal and then working our asses off to get to it. But there can be a trap, can't there?
Absolutely. And I've been absolutely dreadful at this, so I completely understand where people are coming from. Throughout med school, I decided in 2nd year, right, I want to be a rheumatologist in the NHS, and I'm going to do everything I can to do that as quickly as possible. So I was trying to do extra stuff. I was trying to get publications and just completely gunning for rheumatology, doing everything I could to get into training early enough. And it's only in the last, how long have I been in Australia for? A month. Only in the last kind of 5-6 months, I've realized that it's not just about how quickly you can get into training. It's all about these amazing experiences you can gain and just becoming better as a doctor each day. And I know in the UK it sounded like it was pretty similar in Australia, where it's just a bit of a rat race. Everyone's just trying to get through to the next stage. But I think having that clarity and just enjoying the moment a bit more can be far more beneficial and make you a better doctor in the long term.
And it's easy to compare yourself. It's easy to feel like a race, because we give everywhere you're at has got like a number attached to it, or a job title, and so you can compare yourself to your classmates. And I think that's the trap that we get into, that turns it into a race as opposed to a sort of a vocational journey, because it's very easy to look at Tom or whoever who's got onto a training program, and so now I can beat myself up because I'm not on a training program and I'm PGY4. But again, this is one of those things with the value of some perspective. It doesn't really matter. Well, it does. It doesn't matter if you're a consultant by 31 or 36. But what does matter is if you are engaged in a specialty that you love.
Just on that point, we're going to be doctors for so long. God knows when we'll retire. But as you said, if you're going to be a consultant for 40 years or so, it really doesn't matter if that's 35 years or 40 years. And as you said, it can take that little bit longer to work out what you love. I'm doing emergency department work at the moment, and I used to think I'd absolutely hate it. I had no interest in getting a job in it, and I've been absolutely shocked with how much I'm loving it in Australia, and really might do it long term. So you just never know what you're going to love, and it's just couldn't recommend enough having all these experiences.
I think one of the values, and we talked about this, it's a useful tool, is to not decide on your specialty too early, to keep an open mind and to try a few things out, because we don't necessarily, it's interesting, it's the same with any human experience. There's a myriad of reasons why we do like or don't like something, and they may or not be relevant to us. Like, do you like Marmite or Vegemite? They're pretty similar, and Americans all think they're disgusting, but people will get passionate about which one they prefer. And there's no reason, there's no life value to which one you prefer. It's just probably what you're exposed to as a kid. But specialties are similar. When I was, practicing, for a while there, I was like, right, I want to be a cardiologist. And I realized, but then I started working in cardiology and I didn't love it. What I realized is I'd really loved working with a consultant called Jerry Wilkinson, who was enthusiastic and loved cardiology, that I wanted to love cardiology. And so, but again, like your experience, if you choose rheumatology in PGY2, you've just shut the door on a whole lot of possibility, and also shut the door on the potential to use medicine in a way to explore, to adventure, to travel to new countries, to live in different places, to try different things out, to work in the outback, to go and work on a cruise ship, to whatever, just whatever. If that's interesting to you, there is a time and place for it, isn't there?
Absolutely. I really, really thought I was going to be just someone that would work in England and just be a consultant as soon as possible. And now I've come to Darwin, Australia, and it's just the best decision I've ever made. I'm meeting the most amazing people, tropical medicine, a large indigenous population. I'm loving learning about these amazing people, and I just can't recommend that enough to people. That there's so many doors with medicine, and as you said, there's just so many opportunities with it. And I think now I'm here, I just realized how beneficial it is to experience all of these things and the amazing things you can do with this career.
There is a reality, and this is talking to medical students, the reality is the easiest time to do this is the time that some of us get so locked onto trying to get on a specialty training program. It is in your 20s and 30s, particularly when you don't have a house and a mortgage and kids, and there are some realities that make life less flexible as you grow older. And so I think the dual benefit is the fun that you can have with it, A, but B, also actually how it can contribute to finding that what you're actually passionate about. I locumed as a junior doctor, and I just tried a bunch of different stuff, and I was good at some of it and I wasn't good at some of it, and I liked some of it and I didn't like some of it. But you can be doing, if you're a locum, you can be doing a 3-month or a 1 month or a 2-week job that you don't like. You don't have to be unhappy, because you just go, well, this is just, I've ticked this one off. How useful is that? In another conversation about purpose, actually, in this series, we talk about the Japanese concept of ikigai, which is, find what you love, find what you're good at, find what the world needs, and find what the world will pay for. And it's a really, and the thing about medicine is, the world needs and the world will pay for pretty much everything we find, and we can probably develop the skills to be good. So the key one comes down to find what you love. Actually find what's really energizing, and part of that is take yourself out of that pressure cooker of I've got to progress, to actually this is a journey, and what I've got to do is find what I love, so that the next 30-40 years is fulfilling. As opposed to my blinkers are on to the extent that, I don't even consider the alternative.
Definitely. And I think just on that as well, every experience is worthwhile, even if you realize you don't want to do that job later down the line. One thing I've noticed is every doctor or senior seems to have done a job that other people haven't done, and then they've got an extra little bit of expertise, even if they didn't like it. And I'm far from an expert in anything at the moment. I've only been a doctor for a year, but just one example is because I put all of that time into rheumatology. I now found that in A&E, every time there's someone's got gout or any rheumatological thing, I'm the first one to try and drain the knee and all sorts of things. So I think just it doesn't matter if you don't end up doing that job, but every single experience you gain is going to make you a better doctor long term.
As an ED doctor myself, when I was practicing, I would have loved having you there because, chronic rheumatological things, they're not really emergency departments. So if you've got someone you can just, it's like having the med reg in the ED with you to give it on to. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. Like everything adds to our experience. I did a 3 month psych run. Like I didn't want to do psych, but it was very useful to learn how it worked. And it was also like a 9 to 4 job, which meant I got a lot of surfing. So there was a lot of benefits to doing psych. But working in the outback does just when you're a junior doctor, it doesn't mean that's what you want to do for your life. But man, you're going to get some good experience.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I've even, because I've realised this, potentially I could have got into training next year, but I've decided that I'd quite like to do a PEDS job because of I feel a little bit overwhelmed with PEDS A&E at the moment, PEDS ED at the moment. So I'm going to try and make myself do jobs that I know I don't want to do long term, just to try and get that experience.
The interesting thing is you may find it's that you think you didn't want to do long term. You never know what you're going to love, do you? That's the thing about it. I think that's the cool thing about this discussion is let medicine surprise you, or actually approach your career in a way that it can surprise you. Like if you're so locked in, and we are goal-oriented people generally in healthcare and being doctors, you have to be to get into med school. And if you just keep, but the problem sometimes with having such specific goals is we close ourselves off to opportunity and to the opportunity to be pleasantly surprised. And whereas if you approach your career and go, I'm going to take some years to just see what surprises me, to see what I like, takes the pressure off. It also means that those marks you got in medical school become less and less and less and less important, to the point where you're developing yourself as a well-rounded doctor, and that's what you're going to be judged on.
Absolutely. And as I said, I wish I knew this earlier. I wish I was told.
Well, you've figured it out pretty quickly, I have to say. So, look, I mean, this has been such a useful discussion, I think. This is the discussion that I wish I'd listened to when I was in medical school, which is why we're having these discussions, because there's some useful principles, because so many med students are struggling. It's a tough job. There's no question that it's a tough job. But you can build systems to deal with it. Get it out. Find someone to talk to. Journal. Keep up those external interests. Build a mindfulness meditation practice. These are some pretty practical things that can dramatically reduce how tough it feels. Because the second part is, we talked about pressure, and the reality is most pressure is self-created. To get into medical school, you have to be beyond intelligent these days. You have to be off the charts. And so you are so much more than capable of being there. And B, the medical school wants you there. You're in the gang. You're part of the crew. And as doctors, we see you as one of the gang. As medical school, they want you to succeed. So just give yourself, I know you're going to hold yourself to a high standard. Give yourself a little bit of leeway. Give yourself just a bit of breathing space. Be kind to yourself and acknowledge that the pressure is actually internally created. It's not all external recreated. And then, the way to approach the career is just a useful one. Taking yourself out of the race, or not seeing it as a race, not, again, comparing yourself to others, but actually setting for yourself, if we want to get back to the goal orientation, the goal of finding what you love. Let's try out a few different things. And, I may come back to what I thought I wanted to do, but regardless, I'm going to be more well-rounded. Like, you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, you're going to be a better orthopedic surgeon if you've done PEDS, if you've done O&G, if you've done ED. These are realities that, the more we experience as a junior doctor, the more well-rounded we are, and the more we can actually work within what is a collegial team environment. There are some great things. So I've loved this discussion. I think it's been super helpful. But Tom, I'd like to give you the opportunity to leave people with any final thoughts.
Yeah, so just nice and easy, I would say, whatever you do, just don't let medicine dictate your entire life. It's great to have passion as a doctor. You need that passion, but you're so much more than just a doctor. And I firmly believe that those of you that look after yourself, keep your hobbies and keep what makes you, you'll be a better doctor for it long term and a happier person.
Better doctor and a happier person, that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've loved doing this, so thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. And to anyone listening, I hope it's been of value. I'm sure it has. Thanks, Tom, for your time and for your insights. As you say, you got some perspective, but you're close enough. So.